Picture the sheer face of a mountain where the only sounds are the wind and the faint echoes of a history long since past. High above the world, nestled among the clouds, lie the silent remains of cities that once pulsed with life. These are not just collections of old stones. They are the final, enduring testament to entire civilizations, to kingdoms that rose to incredible heights only to vanish into the mist of time. What if you could stand there on that abandoned ridge and listen to what these ruins have to say? The story they tell is one of the most compelling mysteries of our human past, a narrative written not on paper, but in the very architecture of ambition and survival. Today, we embark on a journey to those remote peaks and hidden valleys, to the empires carved in silence, to understand what these abandoned mountain cities reveal about the forgotten kingdoms that built them. From the incredible Inca citadel of Machu Picchu, seemingly suspended between the Andes and the heavens, to the breathtaking monasteries of Meteora that defy gravity in Greece, these sites capture our imagination for a reason. They represent a choice, a deliberate turning away from the easy path in favor of the formidable challenge. Why would a society choose to build its greatest achievements in such inaccessible places? The answers are as complex as the cultures themselves, rooted in a powerful mix of defense, spirituality, and a profound connection to the natural world. These were places of safety, of sanctity, and of supreme effort. By examining their silent streets and empty palaces, we begin to see the blueprints of human ingenuity, the incredible ways people adapted to thrive in the most demanding environments on Earth. Yet, their very survival poses an even greater question. If they were so strong, so clever, so resilient, why were they ultimately abandoned? The silence that now reigns over these places is profound, but it is not empty. It is filled with clues. Each fallen wall, each overgrown terrace, each faded mural is a piece of a puzzle waiting to be assembled. The story of these forgotten kingdoms is not just a tale of ancient history, it is a mirror reflecting our own world. Their successes teach us about innovation and resilience, while their declines offer sobering lessons about the fragility of power, the impact of environmental change, and the unforeseen consequences of economic shifts. By decoding the secrets of these empires carved in silence, we gain a deeper appreciation for the forces that shape civilizations, including our own. This exploration is more than a look back. It is a way to understand the enduring patterns of human society. So, let's begin this journey together, starting with the first great mystery, a city that has become the very symbol of lost worlds. So, why mountains? When you look at the sheer effort required to haul stone and timber up a near vertical slope, to carve terraces out of solid rock, and to establish a life where every drop of water and every morsel of food must be carefully managed, the question becomes unavoidable. The answer lies in a powerful trifecta of motivations that made the immense challenge not just worthwhile but essential. The first and most obvious reason is defense. In a world of shifting alliances and territorial conflicts, a mountain peak is the ultimate fortress. Imagine you are a scout for an approaching army. You look up at a city like Sigiriya, its palace perched on a colossal rock pillar, accessible only by a narrow, treacherous pathway. The tactical advantage for the defenders is almost overwhelming. They can see you coming from miles away, they can rain down projectiles, and they can control any approach with a tiny fraction of the force you would need to besiege them. This natural fortification allowed smaller kingdoms to resist much larger empires, buying them centuries of independence. It was a matter of survival, and the mountains provided a shield that man-made walls alone could never guarantee. But the decision was never purely practical. For countless cultures, mountains were not just high ground, they were holy ground. They were seen as the pillars of the world, the dwelling places of deities, the points where the heavens touched the earth. By building their cities on these sacred slopes, the inhabitants were literally moving closer to the divine. This spiritual connection infused every aspect of life. The layout of a city would often mirror cosmic principles, with temples and observatories placed at the highest points to facilitate communication with the gods. The arduous act of construction itself became a form of worship, a testament to the people's devotion. The thin, crisp air, the sweeping vistas, the profound silence, all of these elements created an environment that was inherently awe-inspiring, reinforcing the belief that this was a chosen place, set apart from the mundane world below. The mountain was both a physical home and a spiritual anchor. Then there is the matter of resources, which is more nuanced than it might first appear. While high altitudes are not known for fertile soil, they offer other critical advantages. Mountain springs provide a reliable, clean source of water that can be channeled through sophisticated aqueducts and stored in cisterns, a vital necessity that lowland rivers, prone to flooding or contamination, could not always guarantee. The varying elevations create distinct microclimates, allowing for a diverse range of crops to be cultivated on terraced slopes. Furthermore, these locations often sat astride important trade routes, paths through passes that connected different regions. Controlling these choke points could generate immense wealth, as caravans would have to pay tribute to pass through the kingdom's territory. The mountain city was not an isolated refuge. It could be a strategic hub, a toll gate, and a trading post rolled into one. This unique combination of factors, security, sanctity, and strategic resource management, forged a particular type of society. Life at high altitude was demanding. It required cooperation, meticulous planning, and incredible resilience. The very act of living there selected for strong, adaptable people. Their architecture had to conform to the contours of the land, resulting in the breathtaking, gravity-defying structures we marvel at today. Their daily routines were shaped by the climb, the thin air, and the seasonal rhythms of the high peaks. This foundational choice of landscape did not just determine where they lived, it fundamentally shaped who they were, embedding a character of endurance and ingenuity into the DNA of their civilization. It is this profound relationship between people and place that sets the stage for the specific, awe-inspiring marvels we are about to explore. And so we arrive at the first great mystery, a name that echoes with the romance of exploration and the pang of loss, Machu Picchu. Cradled between two dramatic peaks in the Peruvian Andes, this city seems to float in the clouds, a masterpiece of stone seamlessly woven into the spine of the mountain. Its discovery by the outside world in the early 20th century, thanks to the expedition of Hiram Bingham, immediately captured the global imagination. But for all its fame, the fundamental question remains: what was this breathtaking place actually for? The leading theory suggests it was a luxurious royal estate, a kind of country retreat for the Inca emperor Pachacuti, built around the middle of the 15th century. Imagine the emperor and his court ascending to this celestial sanctuary, far from the administrative hustle of the capital, Cusco. The presence of exquisite, finely crafted buildings in a distinct royal sector supports this idea. Yet the spiritual energy of the site is undeniable. The positioning of key structures aligns with breathtaking precision to solar events, like the sun perfectly framing the window of the Temple of the Sun during the winter solstice. This points powerfully to its role as a major religious center, a place where Inca priests could commune with the sun god, Inti. The truth likely lies in a fusion of these purposes, a place where political power, spiritual devotion, and agricultural ingenuity converged in a single, awe-inspiring vision. The true genius of Machu Picchu, however, lies not just in its location but in its construction. The Inca were unparalleled masters of what is known as ashlar masonry, cutting and fitting massive blocks of granite so perfectly that not even a knife blade can slide between them. This was not merely for aesthetic appeal. The Andes is one of the most seismically active regions on Earth, and this dry stone construction technique allowed the walls to dance during an earthquake, settling back into place once the tremors subsided. They built with the land, not just on it. The vast network of agricultural terraces that cascade down the mountainsides served a dual purpose. They provided flat land to grow crops like maize and potatoes, but they were also a brilliant feat of geological engineering, preventing the incredibly steep slopes from eroding away under torrential rain. A sophisticated system of channels diverted water from natural springs, ensuring a steady supply to the city's fountains and baths. Every aspect of the design reveals a deep, sophisticated understanding of the environment and a commitment to existing in harmony with it. This harmony makes its abandonment all the more puzzling. There are no signs of a violent end, no evidence of siege, battle, or destruction. Instead, the prevailing theory is that Machu Picchu was simply left behind. As the Spanish conquest gained momentum in the 1530s, toppling the Inca Empire and unleashing waves of disease, the vast network that supported this mountain retreat began to collapse. The imperial system that provided labor, resources, and a reason for the estate's existence disintegrated. The elite who lived and worshipped here likely melted away, perhaps returning to their home communities or joining resistance efforts elsewhere. The city, so dependent on the greater Inca machinery, became obsolete almost overnight. It was never found by the Spanish conquistadors, and over the centuries the jungle crept back in, shrouding its stone buildings in a protective green blanket until its rediscovery. It stands not as a monument to defeat, but to a way of life that was profoundly interrupted, its silence a testament to the fragility of even the most brilliantly conceived civilizations when faced with external, overwhelming change. While Machu Picchu represents a civilization's harmonious adaptation to a mountain environment, our next mystery takes the very concept of seeking the heights to an almost superhuman extreme. In the heart of central Greece, a forest of colossal rock pillars rises abruptly from the plains of Thessaly, their summits crowned with one of the most astonishing sights in the world, the Monasteries of Meteora. The name itself means suspended in the air, and it is a perfectly literal description. These structures do not simply sit on a mountain, they defy gravity, perched atop sheer sandstone pinnacles that seem to have been placed there by a giant's hand. This was not the project of a mighty empire, but the profound undertaking of individuals seeking something beyond physical security, absolute spiritual solitude. The story begins in the 14th century, a time of immense turmoil in the Byzantine Empire. As Ottoman Turkish expansion encroached and political instability raged below, hermit monks sought a refuge where they could dedicate their lives to prayer, undisturbed by the conflicts of the world. They first inhabited caves and fissures in these towering rocks, living in extreme asceticism. But seeking even greater isolation and safety, they embarked on the seemingly impossible task of building permanent monasteries on the summits. The motivation was twofold: to physically separate themselves from the world in a place so inaccessible that only the most determined could reach them, and to be physically closer to God, elevating their prayers literally and symbolically. This was a sanctuary forged not just from stone but from faith and necessity. the construction methods they employed are the stuff of legend and almost defy belief. For centuries, the only way up was via removable ladders or a perilous climb. The primary method for hauling building materials, supplies, and even people up the vertical cliffs was a system of nets, baskets, and ropes operated by hand winches and a complex arrangement of pulleys. Imagine the faith required to sit in a woven net, being hoisted hundreds of feet into the air by a single, aging rope, a process the monks laconically referred to as the time when the net was pulled and the soul was left to God. Each piece of wood, every stone for the walls, every sack of mortar had to be painstakingly lifted this way. The work was so slow and dangerous that the construction of a single monastery, like the Great Meteora, could span multiple generations. It was a project measured not in years, but in lifetimes, a physical manifestation of a faith that looked beyond a single human span. And what did they build in this sky-born sanctuary? These were not just simple hermitages. At their peak, there were 24 monasteries functioning as bustling, self-sufficient communities. They contained churches, libraries, refectories, and cells for the monks, all clustered on the limited space of the rock tops. Their greatest contribution to history, however, was their role as arcs of preservation. While the world below was convulsed by war and shifting empires, the monasteries of Meteora became bastions of Orthodox Christianity, safeguarding a priceless cultural heritage. Their libraries protected countless illuminated manuscripts, theological texts, and ancient writings that might otherwise have been lost. Their churches were adorned with exquisite frescoes, some of the finest examples of Byzantine art, depicting saints and biblical scenes with a vibrancy that has survived for centuries. These artworks were not mere decoration. They were a form of theology in color, a silent sermon for the monks who lived in their presence. The monastery's story did not end in the medieval period. They faced declines and revivals, and today only 6 remain active, while stairs were carved into the rock in the 1920s, making access vastly easier for tourists and pilgrims. The essence of Meteora endures. It stands as a breathtaking testament to a different kind of power, not the power of kings and armies, but the power of unwavering conviction. It shows us that the human drive for spiritual meaning can motivate achievements that rival the grandest imperial ambitions. The monks of Meteora sought not to command an empire, but to transcend the earthly world altogether, and in doing so, they created a legacy that continues to inspire awe. This remarkable pursuit of peace through isolation presents a stark contrast to our next destination, where a mountain stronghold was born not from a quest for tranquility, but from a king's consuming fear and paranoia. If the monasteries of Meteora represent a flight to the heavens for spiritual salvation, then the rock fortress of Sigiriya is a monument to a very earthly kind of fear. Rising with breathtaking audacity from the plains of central Sri Lanka, this colossal stone pillar is not just a natural wonder. It is the stage for one of history's most dramatic tales of royal ambition and paralyzing paranoia. In the 5th century, this place was transformed by a king who sought not communion with the gods, but absolute security from his enemies. His name was Kasyapa, and his story is a Shakespearean tragedy written in stone and water. After a violent coup that involved allegedly walling up his own father, King Datusena, alive, Kasyapa seized the throne. But the crown he took was stained, and his claim was challenged by his rightful heir and half-brother, Moggallana, who had fled to India to raise an army. Consumed by fear of retribution, Kasyapa made a monumental decision. He would not rule from the traditional capital of Anuradhapura, a city vulnerable on the flat plains. Instead, he would create an entirely new capital, an impregnable fortress on the summit of this 200-meter-high rock, a place where he could see any approaching threat from every direction. The scale of his ambition is almost incomprehensible. Sigiriya was not merely a palace on a rock, it was a sprawling, sophisticated city that cascaded down from the summit. The approach to the top was a masterclass in psychological and physical defense. Visitors and residents alike would first pass through elaborate water gardens at the base, a stunning display of hydraulic engineering with symmetrical pools, fountains powered by underground pressure, and serene moats. These gardens were a statement of power and refinement, a deceptive calm before the arduous ascent. The climb then began in earnest, winding up the rock face. At one point, the path would pass between the massive paws of a gigantic brick and plaster lion, whose head and shoulders have long since crumbled away. This entrance through the lion's throat is the source of the name Sigiriya, which means lion rock. It was a deliberate piece of symbolic architecture designed to instill awe and fear, proclaiming the king's leonine power to all who approached his den. But the most intimate and enchanting features of Sigiriya are found on the sheer western face of the rock. Here, sheltered within a protected pocket, is a gallery of breathtaking frescoes. These paintings, known as the Cloud Maidens, depict ethereal, life-sized women who appear to be floating against the sky. Their identities are still debated. Are they celestial nymphs, known as apsaras, or perhaps ladies of Cassiopeia's court? What is undeniable is their artistic mastery. Painted with natural pigments on a plaster surface, they have survived centuries of exposure. Their vibrant colors and graceful forms are testament to the incredible artistic skill present in Cassiopeia's kingdom. Just beyond the fresco gallery, the path runs alongside the famous mirror wall. Originally, this wall was so highly polished with a special plaster containing egg white, honey, and lime that the king could see his reflection as he walked by. Over the centuries, it became a surface for visitors to inscribe their thoughts, creating one of the oldest known examples of tourist graffiti, with poems and observations dating back over 1,000 years, a human counterpoint to the official art of the frescoes. Reaching the summit, one finds the true marvel. The plateau at the top, covering nearly 1.5 hectares, was meticulously leveled and transformed into a luxurious palace complex. The engineering feats here are staggering. Sophisticated cisterns were carved directly into the rock to capture and store monsoon rainwater, ensuring a year-round supply for the inhabitants. The foundations of royal baths, audience halls, and pavilions outline a lifestyle of opulence and comfort, all taking place in what must have felt like the realm of the gods. From this vantage point, Cassiopeia could survey his entire kingdom, a constant reminder of the power he wielded and the isolation his fear had created. He had built the ultimate defensive retreat, a fortress that seemed utterly unconquerable. But as is so often the case, the greatest threats come not from outside the walls, but from within. Cassiopeia's reign lasted for 18 years, a period of immense artistic and architectural achievement overshadowed by the circumstances of its inception. The inevitable confrontation finally came when his brother Mogollona returned from exile with an army. The legends say that during the decisive battle on the plains below Sigiriya, Cassiopeia's own fortune turned against him. As the fight raged, his war elephant suddenly strayed from the front lines, perhaps misdirected into a swamp. His troops, interpreting this as their king's retreat, broke ranks and fled. Left utterly alone and facing capture and a humiliating death, Cassiopeia is said to have drawn his dagger and taken his own life. The fortress that was designed to be his ultimate protection became the symbol of his tragic downfall. With Cassiopeia dead, Mogollona reclaimed the throne and returned the capital to Anuradhapura. the magnificent city of Sigiriya, so intimately tied to one man's desperate ambition, was largely abandoned. It was later used for a time as a Buddhist monastery, but its gloried days as a royal capital were over. Its story a poignant lesson in how the very structures we build for security can become our cages. From the tragic tale of a single king's fortress, we journey now to a city that represented the collective genius of an entire people. If Sigiriya is a monument to one man's fear, then Petra is a testament to a civilization's profound understanding of its environment. Hidden within the rugged desert canyons of southern Jordan, the rose-red city is a marvel that seems to have been conjured from the very rock it inhabits. Its most famous facade, the treasury, appears with dramatic suddenness at the end of a long, winding sandstone fissure known as the Sick. The first glimpse of this intricate, towering monument, glowing in the desert sun, is an experience that has captivated travelers for centuries. But to see Petra as merely a collection of beautiful tombs is to miss its true wonder. This was the flourishing capital of the Nabatean Empire, and its greatest achievement was not what it built but how it survived. The Nabateans were masters of a resource far more precious than gold in the desert: water. In a region that receives only a few inches of rainfall a year, often in sudden, violent flash floods, they performed a kind of hydraulic magic. They transformed a potentially catastrophic force into a lifeline. Their engineering was breathtaking in its complexity and foresight. They constructed a vast network of dams to capture floodwaters, diverting the torrents into a system of canals and pipelines that fed the city. They carved thousands of cisterns into the solid rock, some large enough to hold the water supply for an entire neighborhood. Every drop was meticulously collected, stored, and distributed through ceramic pipes that ran under the streets, supplying public fountains, private homes, and lush gardens. This mastery over water allowed Petra to support a population of perhaps 30,000 people at its peak, creating an oasis of civilization in the heart of an arid wilderness. They did not fight the desert, they learned to dance with it, turning its scarcest element into their greatest strength. This control over water was intrinsically linked to the source of their immense wealth: trade. By the 1st century BC, the Nabateans had established a commercial empire centered on the lucrative incense trade. Frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins highly prized in the ancient world for religious ceremonies and medicine, were carried by camel caravans from southern Arabia north toward the markets of Egypt, the Mediterranean, and beyond. Petra sat at a critical nexus of these routes. Controlling this choke point meant the Nabateans could levy taxes and tolls on the merchants, amassing staggering fortunes. The magnificent tombs and temples they carved into the cliffs were not just places of burial and worship, they were powerful statements of commercial success. The famous treasury, with its ornate Hellenistic-style columns and sculptures, was likely the tomb of a powerful king. Its elaborate facade, visible to every trader entering the city, was a billboard of Nabatean prosperity and sophistication, designed to impress and intimidate. It proclaimed that this was not some remote desert outpost, but the heart of a wealthy and powerful kingdom. Yet this very strength contained the seeds of its decline. Petra's prosperity was built on a foundation that proved vulnerable to change. As the Roman Empire expanded its influence, it began to favor sea routes for trade. Ships could carry goods from Arabia to Egypt and the Roman world more cheaply and safely than the long, arduous overland journey through the desert. Slowly, inexorably, the lifeblood of trade that had flowed through Petra began to diminish. The Nabatean kingdom was formally annexed by Rome in 106 CE, and while the city continued to be inhabited, its importance as an independent economic powerhouse waned. It became just another provincial city within the vast Roman Empire, its unique identity gradually fading. Then, in 363 CE, a massive earthquake struck the region, crippling Petra's sophisticated water management system and destroying many of its buildings. While the city struggled on for centuries, it never fully recovered from this double blow of economic shift and natural disaster. The silence that now envelops Petra is a profound lesson in economic fragility. It shows that a kingdom can be brilliantly adapted to its physical environment, mastering every natural challenge, yet still be undone by shifts in the invisible currents of commerce and power. The Nabateans had solved the puzzle of survival in the desert, but they could not control the changing tides of global trade. Their story is a powerful reminder that civilizations are not isolated entities. They are interconnected nodes in a vast network. When the routes of that network change, even the most magnificent of cities can be left behind, its grand facades becoming a beautiful but silent monument to a vanished world. This perspective of an empire undone by external economic forces stands in stark contrast to the next mystery we will explore, where the greatest threat came not from shifting trade routes, but from the environment itself. Our journey now takes us from the arid canyons of Jordan to the dense, humid rainforests of Guatemala, where an entirely different kind of mountain city once thrived. Tikal did not rise on a natural peak, it created its own skyline. Emerging from the emerald embrace of the jungle, the grand pyramids of this ancient Maya metropolis were deliberate mountains of stone constructed to scrape the heavens. While the Incas built upon existing summits and the Nabateans carved into canyon walls, the Maya of the lowlands engineered their own sacred high ground, demonstrating that the human drive to reach for the sky is not limited by geography. For over a millennium, from roughly 600 years before the Common Era to around 900 years after, Tikal was not just a city, it was a superpower in the heart of the Maya world, a sprawling urban center that at its height may have been home to 100,000 people or more. The scale of Tikal is almost incomprehensible when you stand at its core, the Great Plaza. This vast, open space is flanked by monumental architecture that speaks to every facet of Maya society. To the east rises Temple I, also known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar, a soaring pyramid that served as the tomb of the powerful ruler Jasor Chan Kayawil. Its steep staircase leads to a summit where rituals were performed, literally elevating the king and his priests above the common world and closer to the realm of the gods. Directly opposite stands Temple Roman II, the Temple of the Masks, creating a balanced, awe-inspiring ceremonial heart. But the city extended far beyond this central plaza. It was a complex urban network covering over 6 square miles, with thousands of structures ranging from elegant palaces for the nobility and sprawling administrative complexes to humble thatched roof residences for the vast majority of the population. Causeways known as Sakbiob linked the different districts, while reservoirs carved into the limestone bedrock collected precious rainwater to sustain the massive population through the dry season. This was not a simple ceremonial center, it was a fully functional, densely populated city, a testament to urban planning on a grand scale. The true genius of the Maya, and Tikal in particular, lay in their intellectual achievements. They were master astronomers, their priests meticulously tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and planets with an accuracy that rivals modern calculations. The alignment of their temples was not arbitrary. Structures were precisely positioned to mark celestial events like the solstices and equinoxes. When the sun set on these specific days, it would align perfectly with a temple doorway or cast a specific shadow across a staircase, turning the entire city into a giant stone calendar. This knowledge was power. It allowed the ruling class to predict seasonal changes for agriculture, to schedule religious ceremonies with divine precision, and to reinforce their authority by claiming a unique connection to the cosmos. Their sophisticated writing system, composed of intricate hieroglyphs, recorded these events, along with the histories of dynasties, wars, and alliances on stone stelae and in bark paper codices. They even developed the concept of zero independently and used a complex calendar system that is still admired for its precision today, which makes the city's eventual silence all the more haunting. Around the 9th century of the Common Era, something went terribly wrong in the southern Maya lowlands. The great cities of the Classic period, including Tikal, began a process of rapid decline. The construction of grand monuments ceased, the intricate dated inscriptions on stelae stopped, the elite palaces were abandoned, and the population plummeted. This was not a single catastrophic event, but a slow, systemic collapse. For a long time, the mystery was framed as simply the Maya collapse, but modern research paints a far more complex and sobering picture. It was a perfect storm of interconnected crises. Evidence from lakebed sediments points to a series of severe, multi-decade droughts that would have devastated the maize-based agriculture that fed Tikal's immense population. To build their cities and to create plaster for their monuments, the Maya had to clear vast tracts of forest through a process known as slash and burn. This widespread deforestation likely exacerbated the drought, leading to soil erosion and a rise in local temperatures, creating a feedback loop of environmental degradation. At the same time, the political landscape was fracturing. The Maya world was not a unified empire but a collection of powerful city-states, like Tikal and its great rival, Calakmul, locked in a centuries-long struggle for dominance. Inscriptions tell of escalating warfare, of kings being captured and sacrificed, and of alliances shifting. This wasn't just ritualized combat, it was total war that would have disrupted trade networks, consumed resources, and terrorized the rural population. The environmental stress likely intensified this conflict as kingdoms fought over dwindling water and fertile land. The ruling class, whose power was based on their ability to intercede with the gods for rain and prosperity, would have seen their legitimacy crumble as the droughts persisted and the wars intensified. The social contract broke down. The people, facing starvation and violence, likely simply left, migrating to more stable regions or dispersing into smaller, sustainable communities. The jungle, which the Maya had held at bay for centuries, slowly and silently began to reclaim its territory, swallowing the great plazas and towering temples until they were lost to the world. The story of Tikal is a powerful warning about the fragility of even the most brilliant civilizations when pushed beyond their environmental and social limits. The story of Mesa Verde offers a profound shift in perspective on what it truly means for a civilization to vanish. Here, nestled within the vast canyons of what is now Colorado, the ancestral Pueblones did not build upward toward the sky, but instead, they built into the earth itself, crafting entire communities within the shelter of immense natural alcoves. These were not temporary shelters but sophisticated, multi-story apartment complexes carved from the very rock face, with some, like the magnificent Cliff Palace, containing over 150 rooms and 23 kivas, which were circular, subterranean chambers used for ceremonial gatherings. The scale and complexity of these cliff dwellings speak to a society that was deeply communal, highly organized, and incredibly ingenious. Life in these alcoves was a carefully orchestrated balance. The south-facing orientation of the dwellings provided precious warmth from the winter sun while offering shade during the intense summer heat. The overhanging cliff roofs protected the structures from snow and rain, preserving the delicate sandstone brickwork for centuries. Access was deliberately difficult, often involving hand and toe holds carved into the cliff face or removable ladders, creating a formidable defense against any potential threats. But this was more than just a defensive strategy. It was a way of life that fostered an intense interdependence and a powerful sense of shared identity. To sustain a population that may have numbered in the thousands across the Mesa Verde region, the people became masters of dry farming on the mesas high above their cliffside homes. Without relying on rivers or large-scale irrigation, they developed techniques to coax life from the arid soil. They planted their staple crops of corn, beans, and squash in carefully selected areas that could capture the limited rainfall. They built check dams and reservoirs to channel every precious drop of water, and they selected drought-resistant strains of corn that could thrive with minimal moisture. The connection between the mesa tops and the cliff dwellings was fundamental. Each day, people would climb up to tend their fields and gather resources, returning to the safety and community of the alcoves in the evening. This rhythm of life, split between the open sky of the mesa and the sheltered embrace of the cliff, defined their existence for generations, creating a stable and resilient culture. Then, in the 13th century, this carefully balanced way of life began to change. The archaeological record shows a clear and relatively rapid departure from the region over a period of a few decades. For a long time, this was a mystery, but modern scientific methods, particularly the study of tree rings, have revealed a likely culprit: a profound and prolonged drought, often referred to as a megadrought, that gripped the region for nearly half a century. Imagine the desperation as season after season, the rains failed to arrive. The sophisticated water capture systems would have run dry. The resilient corn strains would have withered in the fields. The very knowledge that had sustained them for centuries was rendered useless in the face of a climatic shift that was beyond their experience. This environmental catastrophe likely triggered other pressures. As resources became scarce, tensions between different communities may have increased. The very defensibility of the cliff dwellings might have become a liability if conflict over scarce food and water made isolation dangerous rather than safe. Social structures, perhaps centered on religious leaders who were expected to bring rain, may have fractured as their rituals failed. What is truly remarkable about Mesa Verde, however, is not that people left, but how they left and what happened next. The evidence does not point to a single catastrophic event that wiped everyone out. Instead, it suggests a deliberate, organized migration. Rooms were cleaned out, doorways were sealed, and structures were left in good order. It was not a panicked flight, but a strategic decision to seek a new beginning. They moved south into what are now Arizona and New Mexico, where water was more reliable. There, they joined with other Pueblo communities or established new ones. This is the most powerful lesson of Mesa Verde. Abandonment was not a failure or an ending. It was an adaptation, a conscious choice to preserve their culture by moving it to a more hospitable land. The descendants of the builders of Cliff Palace are not a lost people. They are the modern Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo nations who continue to live in the Southwest, maintaining cultural traditions, agricultural practices, and spiritual beliefs that stretch back in an unbroken line to their ancestors in the cliffs. Mesa Verde stands as a silent monument not to a dead civilization, but to a living, enduring culture that made the difficult choice to evolve and survive. This powerful idea of continuity, of a people enduring beyond their stone cities, completely reframes our next mystery, which takes the concept of seeking refuge in the landscape to its most extreme and hidden form. While the ancestral Pueblones sought refuge in the open-faced alcoves of cliffs, another civilization pursued the ultimate shelter by moving in the opposite direction, not up, but deep down into the earth. In the heart of Turkey's otherworldly region of Cappadocia, where the landscape is dotted with surreal, fairy chimney rock formations, lies an even more incredible secret hidden from view. Beneath the surface, an entire subterranean world lies in wait, the ancient city of Derinkuyu. This is not a simple cave network or a small hideout. It is a multi-level metropolis, an intricate warren of tunnels, rooms, and passages carved from the soft, malleable volcanic rock known as tuff. The scale is almost beyond belief. At its fullest extent, this underground city descended an estimated 18 levels deep, with space to accommodate up to 20,000 people, along with their livestock and supplies for extended periods of time. The sophistication of Derinkuyu's design reveals a society that planned for every contingency of a long-term siege. This was a fully functional city, complete with all the necessities for survival. There were living quarters, some small and intimate for families, others larger and more complex. There were stables for animals, not just to keep them safe, but also to provide a source of warmth in the cooler depths. Communal kitchens, dining areas, and storerooms were strategically placed. Remarkably, the city even featured specialized rooms like wine presses and oil presses, indicating that the inhabitants weren't just hiding. They were continuing the rhythms of daily life, producing goods for trade and consumption. Perhaps most telling of all are the presence of churches and chapels, spaces for communal worship and spiritual solace, suggesting that the people intended to preserve their culture and social structure even in the depths of the earth. This wasn't a temporary panic room. It was an entire civilization turned inward for its own protection. The genius of Derinkuyu, however, lies in its engineering, which solved the two greatest challenges of underground life, air and security. Ventilating a city of thousands of people buried deep underground would seem an impossible task, yet the builders carved over 50 distinct ventilation shafts, some stretching over 100 meters to the surface. These shafts provided a constant flow of fresh air to every level, ensuring the inhabitants could breathe easily and that smoke from cooking fires could escape. Even more impressive were the security measures. The entire city could be sealed off from the inside using massive, circular stone doors. These were not ordinary gates. They were immense, wheel-shaped slabs of rock weighing up to half a ton each. They were designed to roll across the entrances to key tunnels and passages, blocking them completely. They could only be operated from the inside, and a small hole in the center allowed defenders to attack any invaders who managed to get close with spears or arrows. Each level could be isolated from the others, meaning that even if one entrance were compromised, the rest of the city could remain secure. The primary purpose of this incredible undertaking was without a doubt defense. The region of Cappadocia has been a crossroads of civilizations for millennia, and with that came frequent invasions and conflicts. Historians believe the earliest levels of Derinkuyu may have been started by the Phrygians around the 8th century before the Common Era, but its expansion and most intensive use likely occurred later. It served as a perfect refuge for early Christians fleeing persecution from the Roman Empire, and later from Arab raids during the Byzantine period. When scouts for an approaching army would arrive in the area, they would find the surface world seemingly abandoned. The entire population, along with their valuables and livestock, would have vanished underground, leaving nothing to plunder and no one to capture. The invaders, unable to find the hidden entrances and faced with impregnable stone doors, would eventually have to move on, frustrated and empty-handed. The city was a masterpiece of passive defense, using the earth itself as an impenetrable shield. Derinkuyu's existence fundamentally expands our understanding of how ancient peoples interacted with their environment for safety. It demonstrates that the impulse to seek refuge in extreme geography was not limited to mountain peaks or cliff faces. When the threat was overwhelming, the solution was not to rise above it, but to disappear beneath it. It created a hidden world, a silent, dark mirror to the bustling life on the surface. The rediscovery of Derinkuyu, like so many of these sites, came partly by accident. In 1963, a local man renovating his home knocked down a wall in his basement and stumbled upon a mysterious room, which led to a tunnel, which led to an entire forgotten universe. This chance discovery underscores a crucial point. For all our modern technology, the past still holds secrets that are literally right under our feet, waiting for a curious mind to reveal them. The dramatic tales of discovery behind these lost cities are stories in their own right, often blending local knowledge with the determined curiosity of explorers. When Hiram Bingham arrived at Machu Picchu in 1911, he was not stumbling through an untouched wilderness. He was being led by local Quechua farmers who had known of the site's existence for generations and were living and farming on its terraces. Similarly, the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt could never have found Petra in 1812 without first immersing himself in the local culture. He learned Arabic, adopted the name Ibrahim ibn Abdallah, and presented himself as a pilgrim interested in making a sacrifice at the tomb of the prophet Aaron, which was rumored to be near the hidden city. It was this careful disguise and show of respect that finally persuaded his guides to lead him through the narrow, winding Sikh. These early discoveries remind us that archaeology has not always been the scientific discipline we know today. It began with a spirit of adventure and sometimes a healthy dose of luck. Modern archaeology, however, has transformed dramatically from those early days of exploration. The field has moved far beyond the image of treasure hunters seeking golden artifacts. Today, it is a meticulous science focused on context and understanding. The goal is no longer simply to find a beautiful object, but to understand its story, who made it, how it was used, what it meant to the people who owned it, and why it was left behind. A broken piece of pottery, which might seem like rubbish to an untrained eye, is a treasure trove of information for an archaeologist. The style of its decoration can pinpoint its date. The clay composition can reveal where it was made, telling us about ancient trade routes, and the way its fragments are scattered can indicate whether a room was abandoned peacefully or destroyed in a sudden catastrophe. Every shard, every seed, every animal bone is a tiny, silent witness to the past, and it is the archaeologist's job to listen to their collective testimony. This listening has been supercharged by technology that would seem like science fiction to explorers like Bingham and Burckhardt. One of the most revolutionary tools is LIDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. This technology involves mounting a laser scanner on an airplane or drone and flying it over a dense area like a rainforest. The laser pulses penetrate the thickest canopy of leaves, bouncing off the solid structures hidden below ancient roads, building foundations, terraces, and irrigation canals. The result is a highly detailed, three-dimensional map of the ground surface, digitally stripping away the forest to reveal the ghostly outlines of an entire city lay out without ever breaking ground. LIDAR has been instrumental in places like Guatemala, where it has revealed thousands of previously unknown Maya structures, completely rewriting our estimates of the population size and complexity of their civilization. It is like giving archaeologists X-ray vision for the landscape, but technology does not replace the painstaking work of excavation and interpretation. It guides it. Once a promising site is identified, perhaps through LIDAR or satellite imagery, the careful, slow process of digging begins. Archaeologists work layer by layer, millimeter by millimeter, using small trowels and brushes to uncover the past. They record the exact position of every find, knowing that the context where an object was found in relation to a wall, a hearth, or another artifact is often more important than the object itself. This precise recording allows them to reconstruct the sequence of events, to build a timeline of a city's life. They can identify when a new temple was built over an old one, when a defensive wall was reinforced, or when a wealthy neighborhood was suddenly abandoned. It is a giant, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle where the pieces are made of stone, pottery, and bone, and the picture they form is a chapter of human history. The ultimate reward of this meticulous work is the ability to reconstruct the intangible aspects of these silent cities, the daily lives of the people who called them home. By analyzing soil samples, scientists can identify ancient pollen and phytoliths, the microscopic silica skeletons of plants, to learn what crops were grown and what foods were eaten. Studying the wear patterns on tools reveals their specific uses. Examining human remains can provide a heartbreakingly intimate look at individual lives, revealing details about diet, health, age, and even cause of death. A skeleton with a healed arm fracture speaks to a community that cared for its injured. The remains of a child buried with a simple shell necklace tells a story of love and loss. Through this accumulation of tiny details, the silent stones begin to whisper. They tell us not just about kings and conquests, but about the farmers who tended the terraces, the artisans who shaped the pottery, the families who gathered in the courtyards. Archaeology is the discipline that gives a voice to the countless ordinary people who built these extraordinary empires, allowing their stories, so long silenced by time, to finally be heard. While the story of Derinkuyu reveals a civilization's genius for hiding beneath the earth, the tale of the Goguryeo kingdom showcases a people whose identity was forged in the open, defiant air of mountain peaks. This was not a culture that burrowed for safety, but one that stood its ground from the highest possible vantage point, challenging empires for centuries. Scattered across the rugged borderlands of modern-day China and North Korea, the remains of Goguryeo's mountain fortresses are monuments to a formidable and often overlooked superpower of ancient Northeast Asia. For nearly 700 years, from around the 1st century before the Common Era to the 7th century after, the Goguryeo kingdom not only survived but thrived, its power radiating from administrative capitals and impregnable strongholds built directly into the rocky spines of mountains. These were not mere outposts, they were the very heart of a kingdom that defined itself through military prowess and an unyielding spirit of independence. The architectural signature of Goguryeo is a masterpiece of strategic adaptation. Take the Hwando Mountain Fortress, one of its capitals, which perfectly exemplifies their philosophy. Rather than constructing a conventional city on flat ground, they integrated their fortifications with the natural defenses of the landscape. Massive stone walls were built to follow the treacherous contours of the mountain ridge, creating a defensive line that was both formidable and organic. The building technique itself was distinctive, often using carefully shaped rectangular stones fitted together with remarkable precision. The gates were designed as narrow, easily defensible passages, and the fortresses always included a reliable water source, such as a mountain spring captured within the walls to withstand long sieges. This was urban planning dictated by the principles of survival. The capital city was not just a place of administration, it was a statement of intent, a declaration that the kingdom's sovereignty was as solid and enduring as the rock upon which it was built. From these heights, Goguryeo rulers could survey their domain and project their power across the region. That power was tested relentlessly, and it is here that the Goguryeo legacy becomes truly impressive. For centuries, they found themselves facing the immense military might of successive Chinese empires to their west. The Sui dynasty, in particular, launched a series of massive invasions in the 7th century, involving armies said to number in the hundreds of thousands. The Goguryeo defenders, though vastly outnumbered, used their knowledge of the harsh terrain and the security of their mountain fortresses to devastating effect. They would lure the massive Chinese armies deep into unfavorable ground, attack their supply lines, and wage a war of attrition from their unassailable heights. The Sui campaigns ended in catastrophic failure, a contributing factor to the dynasty's own collapse. This successful defense against a seemingly unstoppable force cemented Goguryeo's reputation as a kingdom of fierce and unconquerable warriors, a story of David versus Goliath played out on an epic historical scale. Yet, if the mountain fortresses give us the skeleton of Goguryeo's military might, the vibrant murals adorning their tombs provide a breathtaking glimpse into the soul of their civilization. These underground tombs, reserved for royalty and nobility, are like time capsules painted with a vibrant palette of colors that have survived for over 1,000 years. The walls are alive with scenes of daily life, mythology, and culture. One might see elaborate processions of court officials, their robes and headdresses depicted in fine detail, revealing a sophisticated and hierarchical society. Other murals capture the energy of everyday existence: hunters pursuing deer through forests, warriors engaged in mounted combat, and even surprisingly lively scenes of acrobats and wrestlers at play. The mythological paintings are particularly fascinating, featuring celestial beings, dragons, and phoenixes that illustrate a complex spiritual world where shamanistic traditions blended with influences from Buddhism and Taoism. These tombs were not places of morbid silence. They were vibrant galleries intended to accompany the deceased into the afterlife with all the richness of the world they left behind. Despite their strength and cultural vitality, the kingdom of Goguryeo eventually met its end, not through a single battle, but through a shifting balance of power on the Korean peninsula. In the 7th century, the southern Korean kingdom of Silla, in a powerful alliance with China's new Tang dynasty, launched a concerted campaign to break Goguryeo's power. This time, the strategy was different and the pressures were too great. After a long and exhausting war, the kingdom fell in the year 668. Its territories were divided between the victorious allies, and its people were gradually absorbed into other states, including the successor kingdom of Balhae. The physical kingdom was gone, but its legacy was far from lost. The mountain fortresses remained, silent sentinels on the landscape. More importantly, the cultural and political influence of Goguryeo played a foundational role in the history of Korea, with many historians considering it a direct ancestor of the Korean people. Its story is a powerful testament to how a kingdom's identity, forged in the crucible of mountain defense, can endure long after its political structure has faded into history, its spirit echoing through the centuries. The story of Great Zimbabwe transports us away from the high mountains and deep canyons to a different kind of powerful landscape: the rolling hills of southern Africa. Here, surrounded by savanna, stand the remains of a city that completely shatters any narrow definition of where great civilizations could flourish. This was not a remote mountain refuge or a desert trading post. Great Zimbabwe was the vibrant heart of a powerful inland kingdom, a testament to African ingenuity and prosperity that reached its peak between the 11th and 15th centuries. The very name Zimbabwe derives from the Shona phrase "Dizimba Mabwe," meaning houses of stone, and the scale of these stone structures is nothing short of breathtaking. The most iconic feature is the Great Enclosure, a massive, curvilinear wall that stands over 10 meters high in places, constructed entirely without mortar from precisely cut blocks of granite. The skill required to fit these stones together so perfectly that they have endured for centuries is a monumental achievement in engineering, a silent rebuke to anyone who might underestimate the technical capabilities of its builders. This architectural marvel was the capital of a kingdom whose wealth was legendary, built on its strategic control over the lucrative trade networks that crisscrossed the continent. From the interior, caravans carried gold from rich mines, ivory from elephant herds, and other prized commodities like copper and cattle. Great Zimbabwe acted as the central hub, a place where these goods were gathered and then funneled towards the Swahili coast on the Indian Ocean, where they were exchanged for exotic imports like Chinese porcelain, Persian glassware, and Indian beads. The discovery of these artifacts within the ruins provides tangible proof of a city connected to a vast global economic system. The sheer scale of the site, which could have supported a population of up to 18,000 people at its height, speaks to the immense economic power concentrated here. This was not an isolated outpost. It was a cosmopolitan center, a bustling metropolis whose influence stretched across the Indian Ocean and beyond. The layout of the city itself reveals a society with a clear and sophisticated social structure. The ruins are divided into three main areas: the hill complex, the great enclosure, and the valley complex. The hill complex, perched on a steep granite outcrop, is thought to have been the spiritual and ceremonial center, the domain of the king and his religious rites. Below it, the great enclosure, with its famous conical tower and high walls, was likely a royal residence, a private sanctuary for the elite. The vast spread of stone foundations in the valley complex, meanwhile, housed the general population, the artisans, traders, and farmers who formed the backbone of the kingdom. This deliberate separation of space, with the ruler elevated both physically and symbolically above the people, points to a highly stratified and organized state, governed by a powerful monarch who controlled both secular and religious authority. Which makes the city's eventual abandonment around the 15th century all the more intriguing. Unlike many of our previous mysteries, there is no evidence of an invasion or a sudden cataclysm. Instead, the decline appears to have been gradual, a slow unraveling likely caused by a combination of environmental and economic factors. One strong theory suggests that the very source of its wealth, gold, may have been its undoing. After centuries of intensive mining, the most accessible local gold deposits may have been exhausted, undermining the economic foundation of the kingdom. At the same time, the land surrounding the city, supporting a large population, may have suffered from deforestation and soil depletion from sustained agriculture. Furthermore, shifts in trade routes could have bypassed Great Zimbabwe, diverting wealth to emerging coastal ports. The ruling elite, finding their power and prosperity waning, may have simply decided to relocate their capital to a more favorable location, leading to a slow migration and the city's eventual quiet desertion. But the silence of Great Zimbabwe stones is layered with a more recent and more troubling history of denial. When European explorers and colonizers encountered the ruins in the late 19th century, they were confronted with a reality that clashed violently with their racist ideologies, which insisted that complex stone architecture was beyond the capabilities of indigenous Africans. Unable to accept the truth, they concocted fanciful theories involving Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the Queen of Sheba, anyone but the ancestors of the local Shona people. This willful misreading of history was used to justify colonial land seizures and the suppression of African culture, as if the land had no prior claim from its original, sophisticated inhabitants. It wasn't until the mid-20th century, and especially after Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, that archaeological evidence irrefutably confirmed the city's African origins. The story of Great Zimbabwe is therefore a double mystery, the ancient mystery of its rise and fall, and the modern mystery of why the truth was so hard for some to accept. It stands as a permanent challenge to our preconceptions, forcing us to recognize that the drive to create monumental civilization is a universal human impulse, one that found magnificent expression in the heart of Africa. After the dramatic tales of civilizations that vanished completely, the story of Mustang offers a different kind of mystery, one not of silence but of a quiet, persistent hum of life. Nestled in the rain shadow of the Himalayas in north-central Nepal, the former kingdom of Low Mustang is a place that seems to defy time itself. This is not a city of empty ruins. It is a living, breathing culture that has endured for centuries in one of the most remote and inhospitable landscapes on Earth. Perched at an average altitude of over 4,000 meters, Mustang is a high-altitude desert, a stark world of wind-scoured cliffs, dramatic canyons, and a sky of impossible blue. The very geography that made it so inaccessible became its greatest shield, preserving a way of life that has all but disappeared elsewhere. Often called a lost Tibetan kingdom, its connection to the Tibetan plateau is profound, not just geographically but culturally and spiritually, creating a unique time capsule of traditions that have been largely unchanged for generations. The heart of this kingdom is its walled capital, Low Mantang. Approaching the city is like stepping into a medieval storybook. The entire settlement is encircled by a massive, imposing wall of packed mud and stone, rising from the barren plains as if it grew from the earth itself. Within these protective walls lies a labyrinth of narrow, winding alleys, whitewashed houses with flat roofs, and the soaring, elegant forms of ancient monasteries, known as gampas. The air is thin and crisp, filled with the scent of juniper smoke and the distant, melodic chanting of monks. The palace of the former king, a multi-story structure that dominates the skyline, stands as a reminder of the stratified society that once ruled here. Low Mantang is not a museum piece, it is a functioning community. People live here, work here, and practice a form of Tibetan Buddhism that is remarkably pure, having been sheltered from the political and cultural upheavals that transformed Tibet itself in the 20th century. This remarkable preservation is a direct result of extreme isolation. For centuries, reaching Mustang was a formidable undertaking, a journey of weeks on foot or horseback through treacherous mountain passes. The kingdom was officially part of Nepal, but it maintained a high degree of autonomy, and the outside world largely left it alone. This seclusion was a double-edged sword. It meant hardship, limited access to modern medicine, and a subsistence lifestyle dependent on animal husbandry and trade along the ancient salt caravan routes between Tibet and India. But it also acted as an invisible barrier, protecting Mustang's unique identity from the homogenizing forces of globalization. The intricate rituals, the vibrant religious art of Thangka paintings, the complex monastic dances, and the oral histories passed down through generations. All of these elements of Tibetan culture flourished here in a state of suspended animation, allowing Mustang to become the last bastion of a traditional Tibetan way of life. This long-standing isolation, however, began to crack open in the latter half of the 20th century. In the 1950s, Mustang became an unexpected player in global politics when it served as a base for Tibetan guerrilla fighters, known as the Khampas, who were resisting Chinese rule in their homeland. This brought a new, albeit secretive, level of outside contact. Then, in 1992, the Nepalese government cautiously opened a limited number of permits for foreign trekkers to enter the region. The floodgates of curiosity were now slightly ajar, but the most significant change, the one that truly marks a turning point for Mustang, is the recent construction of a road. A rough, unpaved track now connects the region to the rest of Nepal, drastically reducing the journey time and transforming the nature of access. No longer is a multi-week expedition required. Goods, people, and ideas can now flow in and out with a speed that was previously unimaginable. This newfound connectivity presents the kingdom with its defining modern challenge: the delicate and difficult balance between preservation and progress. On one hand, the road brings undeniable benefits. It allows for easier access to healthcare, education, and essential supplies for the local population. It creates economic opportunities through tourism, providing a vital source of income for families who have long lived on the edge of subsistence. Young people from Mustang can now more easily travel to cities for education and return with new skills and perspectives. On the other hand, this very progress threatens the unique culture that makes Mustang so special. An influx of tourists, while economically beneficial, can lead to cultural commodification, where ancient traditions are performed for paying audiences rather than as genuine articles of faith. The arrival of satellite television and the internet introduces new values and aspirations that can erode the traditional, community-focused way of life. The very isolation that protected Mustang's heritage is now vanishing, and the kingdom stands at a crossroads, grappling with how to embrace the future without losing its soul. The story of Mustang, therefore, beautifully complicates our entire understanding of what an abandoned city really means. We have journeyed through places like Machu Picchu and Petra, where the silence is absolute, the community's long gone. But Mustang shows us that abandonment is not always a binary event. It can be a gradual transformation, a slow erosion, or a conscious negotiation. Here, the ancient walls of Lo Manthang are not empty. They still enclose a living culture, but one that is now in a dynamic and uncertain dialogue with the 21st century. The people of Mustang are not relics. They are active participants in shaping their own destiny, making difficult choices every day about what to preserve and what to change. Their story is a powerful reminder that cultural survival is not about freezing a society in time, but about finding a way for its core values and identity to adapt and endure against overwhelming odds. The mystery of Mustang is not why it was left behind, but how it has managed to hold on for so long and what it will choose to become. From the living, breathing culture of Mustang, we now turn to a city whose silence is absolute, a place that embodies the haunting beauty of total abandonment. On a windswept, secluded plateau in eastern Turkey, close to the modern border with Armenia, stand the spectral remains of Ani, a ghost city that once pulsed with the energy of 100,000 people. In its 10th and 11th century heyday, it was known by a title that captures its breathtaking ambition: the City of 1,001 Churches. This was no mere exaggeration. Ani was a dazzling metropolis, the brilliant capital of the Armenian Bagratid Kingdom, and a crucial hub on the legendary Silk Road. Its skyline was a forest of domes and spires, a testament to its immense wealth and a level of architectural innovation that was centuries ahead of its time. The city was built on a dramatic, easily defensible site, surrounded on three sides by the deep ravine of the Akurian River. This natural fortress location, much like the mountain cities we have explored, was chosen for security. But its true lifeblood was not its defenses, but its position at the crossroads of continents. Ani's prosperity was built on the flow of commerce. As caravans laden with silk, spices, gems, and other luxuries moved between the empires of Asia and the markets of Europe, they passed through Ani's gates. The city grew fat on the taxes and tariffs it levied, transforming trade into monumental architecture. The wealth fueled a cultural and intellectual golden age. It was a melting pot of peoples, languages, and faiths, home to a diverse population of Armenians, Georgians, Greeks, and others. This religious diversity was literally carved into the city's stone. While Armenian Apostolic Christianity was the dominant faith, the city contained churches, mosques, and Zoroastrian fire temples, a rare level of coexistence for the medieval world. The architects of Ani pioneered new techniques, using local volcanic tuff stone to create structures of incredible lightness and grace. They developed the pointed arch and the ribbed vault, architectural elements that would later become hallmarks of Gothic cathedrals in Western Europe, suggesting a fascinating and indirect transfer of knowledge along these varied trade routes. The grandeur of this era is still visible today in the stunning ruins that stubbornly resist the elements. The Cathedral of Ani, commissioned by its most famous ruler, King Gagic I, was for its time one of the largest buildings in the world, a monumental space designed by the most celebrated architect of the age. Its scale was meant to rival the great churches of Constantinople and Baghdad, a bold statement of Armenian power and piety. Even more architecturally significant is the Church of St. Gregory, with its intricate external carvings depicting biblical scenes and geometric patterns, a masterpiece of medieval artistry. But perhaps the most poignant survivor is the Church of the Redeemer, a unique circular design that was partially shattered by a lightning strike in the 1950s, leaving a perfect cross-section of its elegant construction exposed to the sky, a symbol of the city's own fractured history. For the story of Ani is not one of a single catastrophic fall, but of a slow, agonizing decline, a death by 1,000 cuts. The first major blow was a change of dynasty and a devastating conquest by the Byzantine Empire in the year 1045, which ended Ani's period as an independent Armenian capital. Then, just a few decades later, the city was seized by the Seljuk Turks, an event that, while initially incorporating it into another powerful empire, began to shift its cultural character. A massive earthquake in the year 1316 inflicted catastrophic damage, crumbling the sophisticated buildings that had been its pride. But the wound that ultimately proved fatal was economic. The Mongol invasions of the 13th and 14th centuries shattered the stability of the Silk Road. Trade routes, the very source of Ani's life, were disrupted and then began to shift permanently. Merchants found safer, more profitable paths, bypassing the war-torn plateaus of Anatolia. As the commercial lifeblood drained away, the city's reason for existence evaporated. The final centuries were a sad epilogue of minor rulers and gradual abandonment. Ani passed through the hands of various Turkic dynasties and even a period of Georgian control, but its gloried days were over. The population dwindled, the grand buildings were left to decay, and by the 18th century, it was completely deserted. Its location on a contentious border zone between the Ottoman and Russian empires, and later between Turkey and the Soviet Union, sealed its fate as a forgotten ghost town, a place off limits and shrouded in silence for much of the modern era. Today, standing on that empty plateau, you can feel the weight of that silence. The wind whistles through the skeletons of churches, and the ruins stand as a stark, poetic symbol of a profound historical truth. Ani's fate demonstrates with heartbreaking clarity that a city's survival is inextricably linked to the wider networks of trade and power in which it is embedded. It was not conquered into oblivion in a single battle, but rather it was slowly strangled when those vital connections were severed, a powerful reminder that no civilization, no matter how magnificent, is an island unto itself. The resilience of these mountain kingdoms was truly remarkable, but it was not infinite. We have seen how civilizations like the Maya at Tikal and the ancestral Pueblones at Mesa Verde developed incredibly sophisticated systems to manage their environments, from intricate water catchment to terraced agriculture. Yet a recurring and chilling theme emerges from the silent stones of these cities, a vulnerability to environmental pressures that, when pushed to an extreme, could unravel the most stable of societies. This was not a simple failure of will or ingenuity. It was often a matter of crossing an invisible threshold. Consider the concept of a prolonged megadrought, a shift in climate patterns that persists for decades, not just a few bad years. For a city like Tikal, which supported a population in the tens of thousands, even a slight reduction in annual rainfall could have catastrophic consequences. Their reservoirs, brilliant as they were, had a finite capacity. When the rains failed to replenish them year after year, the water would eventually run out. The maize crops, the foundation of their diet, would wither in the fields. A society built on the promise of seasonal cycles would find itself betrayed by the climate itself, leading to famine, social unrest, and ultimately, the difficult decision to abandon a home that could no longer support life. The relationship between people and their environment was a delicate dance, and sometimes the very steps taken to ensure survival contained the seeds of future crisis. Deforestation is a prime example. To build their magnificent stone cities, to produce lime plaster for their monuments, and to fuel the hearths of a growing population, these civilizations required vast quantities of wood. On the steep slopes of mountain regions, the removal of trees has a magnified effect. The root systems that once held the thin topsoil in place are gone. When the heavy rains come, instead of being absorbed by the forest canopy and the spongy soil beneath, the water cascades down the bare slopes, carrying the precious, nutrient-rich soil with it. This process of erosion would gradually reduce the amount of arable land available for farming, creating a vicious cycle where a shrinking agricultural base had to support a large, centralized population. In some cases, the loss of vegetation could even lead to catastrophic landslides, burying terraces, damaging irrigation channels, and destroying parts of the city itself. The inhabitants were masters of their immediate environment, but they were inadvertently altering it in ways that made it less habitable for future generations. It is crucial to understand that these environmental stresses rarely acted alone. They were powerful catalysts that intensified other existing pressures. A kingdom facing a prolonged drought would see its resource base shrink. This scarcity could easily ignite or exacerbate conflicts with neighboring states, as we saw in the Maya world, where warfare escalated as city-states fought over dwindling water and fertile land. Internally, the social contract between the rulers and the ruled would be tested to its breaking point. The authority of a king or priestly class was often rooted in their perceived ability to intercede with the gods for rain and bountiful harvests. When the rains failed despite their prayers and rituals, that divine mandate would be called into question. The population, facing hunger and hardship, might lose faith in their leaders, leading to internal rebellion, political fragmentation, and a collapse of the centralized authority that had organized and maintained the city. The environmental crisis, therefore, did not just cause a food shortage. It could trigger a crisis of legitimacy that shattered the very social and political glue holding the civilization together. The stories of these ancient cities offer a sobering long-term perspective on resilience. They show us that human societies are complex systems deeply embedded within their natural environments. A civilization can be brilliantly adapted to its specific context, yet still be highly vulnerable to significant shifts in that context. The people of Mesa Verde did not abandon their cliff dwellings because they were incompetent. They left because a climatic shift of a scale they had never experienced made their way of life unsustainable. Their response, an organized migration to a more favorable region, was itself an act of adaptation, a pragmatic decision to preserve their culture by moving it. This historical lens provides a critical insight for our own era of climate uncertainty. We are now the civilization facing large-scale environmental change. The silent cities remind us that understanding our vulnerabilities, managing our resources wisely, and maintaining social cohesion are not just abstract ideals, they are fundamental requirements for long-term survival. The next thread we must pull on, however, shows that even without environmental catastrophe, human conflict alone could be a powerful agent of decline. The formidable walls and dizzying heights that made these mountain cities so alluring were ultimately no guarantee of safety. For all their strategic genius, the architects of these strongholds could not always anticipate the sheer scale of external threats or the corrosive power of internal conflict. The story of Sigiriya is a perfect, tragic example. King Cassiopa built his fortress palace out of a very specific fear: retribution from his brother. And in the end, it was that very fear that was his undoing on the battlefield, leading to the city's rapid abandonment. The stones themselves became a monument to a single man's paranoia, a defensive plan that succeeded in creating an impenetrable home, but failed to address the deeper vulnerabilities of a contested throne. The fortress was perfect, the kingdom surrounding it was not. On a much larger scale, consider the fate of the entire Inca Empire. Its heart was shattered not by a rival kingdom, but by a force it could scarcely comprehend: Spanish conquistadors armed with steel, gunpowder, and most devastatingly, diseases like smallpox to which the indigenous population had no immunity. This was not a war of gradual siege against a mountain citadel. It was a rapid collapse of the entire imperial system. A city like Machu Picchu was never directly attacked. Instead, it was rendered obsolete. Its purpose as a royal estate or religious center was tied to the functioning of the empire's economy, its labor system, and its ruling class. When that central authority in Cusco was toppled and the social fabric unraveled by disease and conquest, the remote city simply lost its reason for existence. The people who maintained it likely drifted away to their ancestral communities, leaving the intricate stonework to the encroaching cloud forest. This demonstrates that a mountain city's greatest weakness might not be its own defenses, but its dependence on a wider network of power that itself can be broken. The danger was not always a foreign invader. Sometimes the seeds of destruction were sown within the city walls. A kingdom could be torn apart by internal political fragmentation, where powerful noble families or regional governors turned against the central authority. Imagine a scenario where a long-reigning monarch dies without a clear heir, plunging the realm into a bitter civil war between rival claimants. In such a struggle, a mountain capital could become a prize to be captured, its defensive strengths making it a target for every aspiring ruler. Alternatively, the ruling elite, seeing the writing on the wall, might simply decide to cut their losses. They could choose to abandon a centuries-old capital, relocating their court and administrative center to a new, perhaps more strategically advantageous or economically vibrant location, leaving the original city to slowly decay. This kind of political decision, a calculated move rather than a desperate last stand, could be just as fatal to a city's survival as any military defeat. The silence that follows is the silence of strategic withdrawal, a ghost town created not by violence, but by a cold reassessment of political fortunes. Ultimately, the stones of these places are silent witnesses to a complex interplay of ambition and violence. They bear the scars of siege engines, the soot of fires, and the subtle marks of hasty departure. They tell us that the desire for security is a powerful human drive, one that can motivate the most incredible feats of engineering. but they also whisper a cautionary tale that walls, no matter how high, cannot forever protect against the determined ambition of a rival, the devastating shock of a new kind of warfare, or the slow-burning embers of internal discord. The very act of building a fortress can create a sense of isolation or invite envy, potentially making it a focal point for conflict rather than a guarantee of peace. The end of these cities forces us to acknowledge that human conflict, in all its forms, has been a constant and powerful architect of history, capable of silencing even the most defiantly placed strongholds. While environmental pressures and the specter of war could cripple a civilization, there was another, equally potent force that could drain the life from even the most magnificent of cities: the slow, silent hemorrhage of economic collapse. A city is not just a collection of buildings, it is a living, breathing organism sustained by a constant flow of goods, services, and currency. Its grand monuments, its intricate infrastructure, and the very food on its citizens' plates all depend on a healthy, functioning economy. When that economic heartbeat falters, the entire body begins to shut down. The story of Petra is a classic and poignant example. For centuries, the Nabateans thrived by mastering the art of the toll booth. Their entire empire was built on controlling the lucrative land routes for frankincense and myrrh. But when the Roman Empire began to favor the predictability and capacity of sea routes, the caravans that were Petra's lifeblood simply stopped coming. The city didn't burn, it was simply bypassed. The taxes dried up, the merchants moved on, and the wealth that had paid for the aqueducts, the temples, and the maintenance crews evaporated. The magnificent city, carved with such skill, became a beautiful but economically irrelevant relic. This vulnerability was particularly acute for cities whose existence was tied to a single, dominant industry or a specific geographic advantage. Great Zimbabwe's immense stone walls were a testament to the power derived from controlling the gold and ivory trade from the African interior. But what happened when those local gold mines were exhausted after centuries of extraction, or when new trade networks emerged, perhaps further south or along alternative paths, that made the great city a detour rather than a destination? The economic foundation simply crumbled. Similarly, a mountain fortress that derived its importance from guarding a critical mountain pass would find itself abandoned if a new, easier route through a different valley was discovered or engineered. Their strategic value was not permanent. It was conditional on the continued flow of people and goods along that specific path. When the economic geography of a region shifted, these specialized cities were left stranded like ships beached by a receding tide. The process of decline driven by economics is often a slow, grinding one, not a dramatic explosion. It begins with a gradual loss of population. As economic opportunities vanish, the merchants need fewer guards, the inns have fewer guests, the artisans find no one to buy their wares, the most ambitious and skilled residents are the first to leave. They migrate to the new centers of power and commerce, seeking a better life for their families. This outmigration creates a negative feedback loop. With fewer taxpayers, the city's government has less revenue to maintain essential services. Repairs to the vital water system are deferred. The grand processional way begins to crack and sprout weeds. The public spaces that once hosted vibrant markets fall into disrepair. The city starts to look shabby, which in turn discourages any new investment or settlement, accelerating the decline. This leads to a crucial reframing of how we view abandonment. When we see a silent city, our minds often jump to images of catastrophe, a plague, a sudden invasion, a devastating earthquake. But in many cases, leaving was not an act of panic. It was a rational, collective decision. It was the recognition that the place they called home no longer offered a viable future. remaining meant facing a life of increasing poverty and hardship. The choice to pack up, to take their skills, their culture, and their memories, and to move to a place with greater opportunity was an act of adaptation. It was a vote for survival. The migration away from a dying city was not an admission of defeat, but a strategic redeployment of human capital toward a new beginning. The empty streets of Petra or Great Zimbabwe are not just monuments to what was lost. They are testaments to the pragmatic choices of people who refused to be imprisoned by the past, who chose to follow the currents of commerce and chanced to build new lives elsewhere. But behind the grand narratives of collapsing empires and shifting trade routes lies a far more intimate and heartbreaking reality: the quiet, desperate choice of an individual family to walk away from everything they have ever known. Imagine standing in the doorway of a home built by your great-grandfather, the stone walls worn smooth by generations of your family. You look at the familiar hearth, the small personal treasures you cannot carry, the fields your ancestors cleared from the wilderness. The decision to leave this behind is not made lightly. It is a choice born from a slow, grinding despair, the gnawing emptiness of a child's stomach after another failed harvest, the cold dread that comes with the sight of smoke on the horizon from a raiding party, or the profound disillusionment when the priest's prayers for rain go unanswered and the king's soldiers can no longer keep the peace. For the average person, the collapse of a civilization is not an abstract historical event. It is the terrifying erosion of the basic securities that make life possible. This departure is a deeply personal tragedy, an inventory of loss measured in the weight of a single pack. What do you take when you don't know if you will ever return? You take the practical, a bag of seed grain for the future, a tool for hunting or building, a warm blanket. And you take the precious, a small amulet passed down through generations, a carving made by a child, a single piece of jewelry that represents a life of accumulated meaning. And you leave behind almost everything else: the heavy grinding stone for making flour, too cumbersome to carry, the large clay storage jars now empty, the loom where you wove cloth for your family. These abandoned objects, which archaeologists later find as silent artifacts, were the very fabric of daily existence. Each one left behind represents a painful compromise, a hope for survival weighed against the anchor of memory. The act of walking away is a severing of roots, an admission that the future is no longer here. Yet the story does not end with the empty city. While the stones fall silent, the people carry their culture with them. This is where archaeology meets the living memory of descendant communities. The abandonment of a place like Mesa Verde was not an extinction, it was a migration. The ancestral pueblones did not vanish, they moved south, and their knowledge, their stories, and their identity traveled with them. Oral histories passed down over centuries among the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo peoples often contain echoes of these great journey stories of emergence, of seeking the center of the world, of following signs to a new homeland. These are not just myths, they are the preserved memories of a pivotal trauma and transition, a cultural map of resilience. The legacy of the cliff dwellings lives on in the architectural styles, the agricultural practices, and the spiritual beliefs of their modern descendants. The city was abandoned, but the civilization transformed and endured. This human element forces us to reframe the entire concept of a lost civilization. The romantic image of a people mysteriously wiped out is often a misconception. More frequently, they simply chose to stop being a centralized, monumental society and instead became a decentralized, adaptive one. The collapse of the political superstructure, the king, the army, the tax collectors did not necessarily mean the death of every individual or the erasure of their culture. It often meant a return to a smaller scale, more mobile way of life. The farmers who left a dying city took their knowledge of crops and seasons with them. The artisans took their skills. The story of abandonment is therefore also a story of diaspora and new beginnings. The silence we perceive is the silence of a specific place, not necessarily the silence of a people. Their voices simply merged into new choruses elsewhere. Ultimately, the most poignant mystery is not why the stones were left behind, but what it felt like to take that final look back. To see the familiar skyline of temples and houses shrinking on the horizon, knowing that the jungle or the desert sands would soon reclaim them. It is a universal human experience, this connection to home, which makes their story so powerfully resonant across the centuries. We can empathize with that wrenching choice because, on some level, it echoes the smaller goodbyes and difficult transitions in our own lives. The abandoned cities remind us that history is made not only by emperors and armies, but by the collective, anonymous decisions of thousands of ordinary people facing an uncertain future, choosing hope over habit, and carrying the embers of their culture into the unknown. This deeply human perspective on loss and resilience makes the silent stones speak in a language we can all understand, a language of memory, struggle, and the enduring will to survive. The silent stones of these abandoned cities are far from mute. They speak in a language of form and function, a dialect of design that reveals the deepest priorities of the cultures that shaped them. Architecture is never accidental. Every wall, every street, every plaza was a conscious decision, a physical manifestation of a society's worldview, its fears, its aspirations, and its social order. By learning to read this frozen language, we can begin to reconstruct not just what these people built, but how they thought and how they lived their daily lives. The layout of a city is a blueprint of its soul, and in the ruins of these mountain kingdoms, that blueprint is remarkably well preserved. Consider the profound difference between the sprawling, horizontal cities of many ancient empires and the vertical, condensed world of a place like the cliff dwellings of Mesa, Verde. That choice to build upward, stacking homes into the protective alcoves of a canyon wall, is a powerful statement about community and security. The very structure forced a level of interdependence that would be unimaginable in a dispersed settlement. Your neighbor's roof was your floor. A shared courtyard was the only outdoor space for dozens of families. This architecture fostered constant social interaction and a collective identity. The difficulty of access, with ladders and handholds as the only means of entry, clearly prioritized defense, but it also created a defined boundary between the intimate, sheltered world of the community and the vast, open expanse of the outside. The city's design tells us that for the ancestral Pueblones, safety and social cohesion were inseparable values, literally built into the fabric of their homes. In stark contrast, the urban plan of a Maya city like Tikal broadcasts a completely different set of values. Here, the primary architectural impulse was not inward and defensive, but outward and demonstrative. The city is organized around immense open plazas, dominated by towering pyramids that reach for the sky. This layout was engineered for spectacle. The wide processional ways were stages for public ceremony, designed to accommodate vast crowds witnessing the rituals that affirmed the power of the divine king. The ruler, perched high atop a temple, was visually elevated above everyone else, a living symbol of the connection between the earthly and celestial realms. The spatial segregation is equally telling. The elaborate stone palaces of the nobility were clustered around the central plazas, while the simpler, thatched roof homes of the commoners spread out into the periphery. The city's design was a physical map of the social hierarchy, reinforcing the authority of the elite every time a person walked from their modest home to the grand central square. The very techniques of construction reveal volumes about a society's technological prowess and its philosophical approach to the world. The Inca mastery of ashlar masonry, where multi-ton stones are cut to fit together with impossible precision without mortar, speaks to an obsession with order, permanence, and collective effort. The achievement is not just technical, it is ideological. Such construction required the coordinated labor of thousands of workers, a testament to a highly organized society capable of mobilizing its people for grand state projects. It also reflects a unique worldview, one that sought harmony with the natural world. Instead of quarrying stone and imposing a new shape upon it, Inca stonemasons often worked with the natural contours of the bedrock, fitting their walls to the living rock in a gesture of profound integration. Their architecture was a conversation with the mountain, not a conquest of it. Even the handling of a fundamental resource like water is articulated through urban planning. The Nabateans of Petra did not just build tombs, they engineered an entire city around the capture, channeling, and display of water. Their sophisticated system of dams, cisterns, and underground pipes was a survival necessity, but it was also integrated into the city's aesthetic. The grand processional way leading into the city was lined with channels and fountains, a calculated display of their mastery over the desert's scarcest resource. This was a powerful form of propaganda. To a thirsty caravan arriving from the arid wastes, the sight and sound of flowing water were a more impressive demonstration of power than any army. The city's layout proclaimed loud and clear, "We have conquered the environment, and our wealth is built on this control." Ultimately, by walking the silent streets of these places, we can trace the patterns of ancient life. The narrow, winding alleys of a fortress city like Sigiriya suggest a need for defensive choke points and a certain controlled, perhaps even secretive, flow of movement. The wide, straight streets of a planned Roman city, by contrast, speak of administrative efficiency and easy military access. The presence of specialized districts, a designated market area, a separate artisans' quarter, a sacred acropolis reserved for temples indicates a complex economy and a clear division between commercial, domestic, and religious life. The architecture tells us who had access to which spaces and when. It reveals where people gathered to trade, to worship, to govern, and to simply live. The stones, therefore, are not just a record of what was built, but a detailed map of how a civilization functioned, how it moved, and how it organized itself from the grandest temple down to the most humble home. If architecture reveals the structural bones of a lost society, then the art and inscriptions they left behind are the vibrant flesh and blood, offering a window into their thoughts, dreams, and daily realities. This is where the silent stones truly begin to speak in a human voice. Take, for instance, the breathtaking frescoes found within the tombs of the Goguryeo kingdom. These are not merely decorations, they are dynamic, colorful narratives painted directly onto the stone. One moment you might be looking at a detailed hunting scene, where mounted archers in distinctive tunics and trousers pursue deer through stylized forests, their bows drawn with an energy that feels immediate even after 15 centuries. The next, you encounter a lavish procession of court officials, their rank clearly indicated by the specific colors and patterns of their robes and their elaborate headdresses. These images provide an invaluable catalogue of fashion, social hierarchy, and even military technology, details that would have otherwise been lost to time. They also venture into the spiritual realm, with vivid depictions of mythical creatures like dragons and phoenixes intertwined with celestial beings, offering a priceless glimpse into a complex world where shamanistic beliefs coexisted with imported philosophies. The power of this artistic communication is equally striking at a place like Sigiriya in Sri Lanka. High on the sheltered western face of the rock fortress, the famous cloud maidens float against a backdrop of sky. These frescoes are a masterpiece of sensuality and grace, their pigment still remarkably vibrant. The identity of these women is still debated. Are they celestial nymphs known as apsaras, bringing blessings to the king, or are they portraits of ladies from King Kasypa's court? Whatever their true meaning, their existence speaks volumes. They reveal a society with a highly developed aesthetic sense, where art was considered essential enough to be executed in one of the most challenging and prominent locations imaginable. The technical skill required to paint such lifelike figures on a sheer rock face is astounding. But beyond technique, these images humanize the king who built this fortress out of fear and paranoia. They suggest a ruler who, despite his ruthless actions, surrounded himself with beauty, who sought to create a world of refinement and elegance high above the political turmoil of the plains below. The art becomes a psychological portrait, adding a layer of poignant complexity to our understanding of his reign. When these cultures left behind written language alongside their art, the potential for understanding expands exponentially. The decipherment of Maya glyphs has been one of the most revolutionary breakthroughs in modern archaeology. For centuries, the intricate symbols carved on stelae and temple walls at places like Tikal were considered mere decorative mysteries. Now we know they are a fully functional writing system, and reading them is like opening a long-lost history book. These inscriptions allow us to move beyond speculation and hear directly from the Maya themselves. They name specific rulers like the great Jasor-chan Kayahuil of Tikal and record the exact dates of their births, accessions to the throne, major military victories, and deaths. We learn about dynastic alliances, bitter rivalries with cities like Calakmul, and elaborate rituals involving bloodletting and communication with ancestors. A temple facade is no longer just an architectural marvel. It is a political billboard, a royal chronicle written in stone, proclaiming the power and divinity of a king for all eternity. The silence of the jungle is broken by the voices of scribes and nobles who meticulously recorded their world, believing their stories would last forever. Yet, for every civilization that left a written record, there are many more whose voices have been silenced almost completely. The Nabateans of Petra, for all their engineering genius and artistic flair, left behind frustratingly few written records of their own history. What we know of them comes largely from the accounts of their Greek and Roman contemporaries. This makes the silent testimony of their art and iconography all the more critical. The intricate carvings on the facade of the treasury, for example, are not just beautiful, they are a symbolic language. The figures of eagles, often seen as messengers of the gods, might signify the transport of the soul to the afterlife. The dancing Amazons carved into the rock could be linked to fertility goddesses or myths that held deep cultural significance. Without a Rosetta Stone to translate their inner world, we are left to interpret these symbols, to read the meaning in the graceful flow of a carved robe or the stern gaze of a stone deity. Each sculpture becomes a puzzle piece, and while we may never know the full picture, the act of interpretation itself connects us to the minds of the artists who carved them. This universal human urge to communicate, to leave a mark that says, "I was here," is perhaps the most powerful message of all. From the formal inscriptions of Maya kings to the simple graffiti scratched by visitors on Sigiriya's mirror wall over 1,000 years ago, the impulse is the same. A soldier stationed at a remote Roman fort might carve his name into a rock. A pilgrim visiting an Egyptian temple adds a prayer. These personal marks, often overlooked in favor of grander art, are equally profound. They are the echoes of individual lives, fleeting moments of presence captured for eternity. Every painted figure, every carved symbol, every scratched name represents a conscious effort to bridge the chasm of time, to send a message into the future. They are a refusal to be forgotten, a testament to the hope that someone, someday, would look upon their work and understand. When we stand before these creations, we are that future audience, and in deciphering their messages, we fulfill an ancient hope, completing a conversation started centuries ago, and ensuring that their soul, however faintly, continues to be seen and understood. High above the world, where the air is thin and the stars blaze with an intensity lost to the well-lit modern world, the ancient architects of these mountain cities performed a kind of magic. They turned stone and mortar into precise astronomical instruments, aligning their greatest structures with the sun, the moon, and the stars. This was not a casual hobby. It was a profound and practical science, one that governed the very rhythm of life and death for their civilizations. At Machu Picchu, for instance, the Intihuatana stone, often called the hitching post of the sun, stands as a masterpiece of this celestial engineering. During the equinoxes, the sun sits directly above this carved granite pillar, casting no shadow at all. It was as if the priests had, for a moment, tethered the sun itself to the earth, a powerful demonstration of their ability to interact with the cosmic order. This event marked a critical turning point in the agricultural year, signaling the perfect balance between light and dark, a time to prepare for planting or harvest. The ceremony surrounding it was both a scientific observation and a deeply religious act, a moment when the entire community could witness their leaders communing with the source of all life. This intimate connection between the heavens and the harvest was the bedrock of survival. For a civilization like the Maya at Tikal, a mistake in the calendar could mean famine. Their survival depended on knowing precisely when the rains would come and when the dry season would begin. By constructing temples like the towering temple of the Great Jaguar with precise alignments to the solstices, they created a massive, immovable calendar etched into the landscape. As the sun set on the winter solstice, it would plunge directly behind a specific temple in the distance, an event that could be witnessed from the central plaza. This was not a secret knowledge locked away in a scroll. It was a public spectacle, a reaffirmation that the king and his priests possessed the wisdom to read the sky and ensure the kingdom's prosperity. The ruler's power was therefore not just political or military, it was cosmological. By claiming a unique connection to the gods who controlled the sun and the rain, the king cemented his role as the essential intermediary between the people and the forces that sustained them. To disobey the king was not just to challenge a man, it was to risk alienating the very gods who made the corn grow. What is truly staggering is the consistency of this celestial obsession across the globe, among cultures that had no possible contact with one another. While the Maya were charting the complex cycles of Venus in the jungles of Mesoamerica, on the other side of the world, the builders of the great stone circles of Europe were tracking the movements of the sun and moon. This suggests something fundamental about the human mind, a universal, driving curiosity to find patterns in the cosmos and to understand our place within its vastness. The silent observatories on mountaintops, from the peaks of the Andes to the plains of England, are monuments to this shared human endeavor. They represent a collective leap from simply fearing the unknown to actively seeking to comprehend it, to measure it, and to integrate its rhythms into the fabric of daily life. This was the birth of empirical science, born not in a laboratory, but from the practical needs of survival and the spiritual yearning for meaning. The sophistication of their astronomical knowledge often went far beyond simple solar alignments. At Chichen Itza, a Maya city not built on a mountain but sharing the same cosmic principles, the Pyramid of El Castillo creates a breathtaking phenomenon during the equinoxes. The angle of the sunlight on the stepped sides casts a shadow that slithers down the staircase, perfectly aligning with a stone serpent's head at the base. For a few minutes, it appears as if a giant feathered snake is descending from the heavens to earth. This was a dramatic representation of the god Kukulkan, and the event would have been a powerful tool for uniting the population through a shared, awe-inspiring experience. Similarly, many Andean sites show evidence of careful observation of the dark patches in the Milky Way, which they saw not as empty space but as celestial animals, a llama, a fox, a toad, integrating their cosmology with their terrestrial environment in a single, seamless worldview. These were not just farmers looking at the sky, they were philosophers and artists using the limitless canvas of the night to tell the stories of their gods and their origins. Therefore, the astronomical alignments we find in these abandoned cities are far more than clever architectural tricks. They are the literal alignment of human ambition with cosmic order. They show a civilization that saw itself as an integral part of the universe, not separate from it. The movement of the stars was a language, and by learning to read it, these ancient peoples believed they could predict the future, appease the gods, and ensure their own continuity. When we stand at Machu Picchu as the sun aligns with the Intihuatana stone, or at Stonehenge as the sun rises over the heel stone on the summer solstice, we are participating in a ritual that is thousands of years old. We are connecting with a fundamental human impulse to look up at the sky and seek answers. The silence of these places is filled with the echoes of that quest, a timeless conversation between humanity and the cosmos that continues to this very day. This deep spiritual connection to the celestial realm leads us directly to the final and perhaps most profound dimension of these mountain cities: their role as sacred spaces, as axis mundi, the very centers of the world. This profound connection between the heavens and high places leads us to the very heart of why mountains held such a powerful, almost magnetic pull for these ancient civilizations. Beyond the strategic advantages of defense and resources, there existed a deeper, more compelling reason. These peaks were considered sacred. They were not just part of the landscape, they were the landscape's soul, believed to be the axis mundi, the sacred center of the world, the point where heaven and earth met. In countless cosmologies, from the Andes to the Himalayas, the mountain was seen as a pillar holding up the sky, a bridge connecting the human realm to the divine. To build a city upon such a slope was therefore more than a practical decision. It was a spiritual act of profound significance. The inhabitants were not just moving to a safer location, they were moving closer to the gods, choosing to live in a space that was inherently charged with numinous power. This sacred geography dictated every aspect of the city's design. The most prominent locations, the spots with the most breathtaking views or the closest proximity to the summit, were invariably reserved for temples, shrines, and observatories. At Machu Picchu, the highest and most carefully constructed buildings are the religious sanctuaries. The Intihuatana stone, the Temple of the Sun, and the Room of the Three Windows are all positioned with precise astronomical alignments, transforming the entire mountaintop into a giant cathedral under the open sky. Similarly, in a Himalayan kingdom like Mustang, the monasteries and palaces are built on the most defensible and visually commanding spurs of rock, their placement a constant reminder that spiritual authority was the highest authority of all. This wasn't about real estate value, it was about spiritual hierarchy. By placing their holiest sites at the apex, these cultures were physically mapping their belief system onto the environment, creating a three-dimensional model of their universe where the divine literally presided over the secular. The immense effort required for construction in these locations takes on a completely different meaning when viewed through this spiritual lens. hauling multi-ton stones up a near-vertical mountainside, as the Inca did, seems like an insurmountable logistical challenge. But if that labor is understood as an act of devotion, a collective offering to the gods, then the hardship becomes a form of worship. The sheer difficulty of the task elevated its spiritual significance. Each stone set in place was a prayer, each terrace carved from the rock a testament to the people's faith. The decades or even centuries of backbreaking work were not a burden to be endured, but a sacred project that bound the community together in a common, holy purpose. The city itself became a monument to their collective piety, a permanent record of their dedication etched into the very bones of the earth. The mountain was not an obstacle to be conquered, but a partner in a divine collaboration. This infusion of the sacred into the everyday extended far beyond the temple walls. The entire rhythm of life in these high-altitude cities was governed by religious principles. Governance was not separate from religion. The king was often a divine figure or the chief priest, his authority derived from his unique ability to communicate with the mountain deities. Agricultural cycles were tied to celestial events observed from mountaintop observatories. The success of the harvest was dependent on correctly interpreting the will of the gods and performing the proper rituals. Even the source of water, often a mountain spring, was likely considered sacred, a gift from the divine entities believed to reside within the peak. There was no aspect of existence, from the political to the personal, from the economic to the agricultural, that was not touched by this pervasive sacred geography. The mountain was not just a place they lived on, it was a presence they lived with, a conscious, powerful entity that demanded respect and propitiation. This makes the ultimate abandonment of these cities a far more complex and traumatic event than a simple migration. Leaving was not merely a logistical or economic decision, it was a spiritual rupture of the highest order. To walk away from the Axis Mundi was to sever the community's direct connection to the divine. It meant turning your back on the home of the gods, abandoning the temples that had been built with such devotion, and leaving the sacred springs and aligned stones to the encroaching wilderness. The psychological and spiritual toll of this separation must have been immense. For generations, their identity had been intertwined with that sacred peak. What did it mean for their souls, for their relationship with their gods, to leave that behind? The abandonment was therefore a crisis of faith as much as a crisis of survival. It forces us to consider the profound, intimate relationship these cultures had with their land, a relationship where place and spirit were inseparable, a stark contrast to our often disconnected modern experience of the world. These ancient cities, silent for centuries, speak to us now with an urgency that cannot be ignored. Their stories are not just fascinating history, they are a mirror reflecting our own modern challenges with sustainability and resilience. The Maya of Tikal, for instance, were brilliant astronomers and architects, yet evidence suggests that widespread deforestation to fuel their growing population and to create plaster for their monuments may have played a significant role in their decline. Clearing the forest canopy altered the local climate, potentially reducing rainfall and leading to soil erosion on the steep slopes they depended on for agriculture. Their civilization, for all its sophistication, may have inadvertently undermined the very environmental support system it relied upon, a powerful cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of resource consumption. Similarly, the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe, whose wealth was built on controlling the gold trade, may have faced a slow decline as the most accessible gold deposits were exhausted after centuries of mining. Their story hints at the vulnerability of an economy overly dependent on a single, finite resource, a challenge that echoes in communities today reliant on industries that can boom and bust. Yet within these same ruins, we also find extraordinary blueprints for resilience. The Nabateans of Petra did not merely survive in their arid desert environment, they thrived by mastering it. Their genius lay in turning a potential threat, the rare but violent flash flood, into their greatest asset. They built a complex network of dams, cisterns, and channels that captured every precious drop of rainwater, storing it for the long dry seasons and even creating lush gardens in the heart of the canyon. This was not a fight against nature, but a profound collaboration with it. They listened to the land and engineered a solution that allowed their city to flourish for centuries. In a different landscape, the ancestral pueblones of Mesa Verde demonstrated a different kind of resilience. Their decision to build intricate cliff dwellings was an adaptation to a demanding environment, providing shelter from the elements and security. But their most resilient act was arguably their departure. When a prolonged megadrought made their homeland unsustainable, they did not stubbornly cling to a failing situation. They made the difficult collective choice to migrate, to seek a new beginning where water was more reliable. This was not a failure, it was a strategic adaptation for long-term survival, a lesson in knowing when to hold on and when to let go for the sake of the community's future. This long-term perspective is perhaps the most valuable gift these forgotten kingdoms offer us. We live in an era of rapid climate change, where the consequences of our actions on a global scale are becoming increasingly clear. The Maya and the inhabitants of Great Zimbabwe show us what can happen when local environments are pushed beyond their breaking point. Their timelines were longer, their changes slower, but the fundamental principle is the same. A civilization cannot outlast the health of the land that sustains it. Conversely, the Nabateans and the ancestral pueblones demonstrate the power of intelligent adaptation and the courage to change course. They prove that resilience is not about building higher walls against inevitable change, but about developing the flexibility and wisdom to live in harmony with the world as it is, not as we might wish it to be. The legacy of these empires carved in silence is therefore a dual one, a stark warning and a practical guide. It warns us of the fragility of complex societies when they lose sight of their environmental foundation. But it also guides us toward the principles of sustainability and adaptive resilience. It teaches us to value water management, to diversify our economies, to think in cycles rather than in straight lines of endless extraction, and to remember that sometimes the strongest action is a strategic retreat. Their stones urge us to look beyond short-term gains and consider the legacy we are building for the generations that will come after us. Will our cities stand as testaments to harmonious existence, or will they too become mysteries for future archaeologists to ponder, wondering why we saw the warnings of the past but failed to heed them? This reflection on our own place in the long arc of history inevitably turns our attention to the physical fate of these very sites, raising urgent questions about how we protect the past we have only just begun to understand. The very act of rediscovering these silent cities has introduced a powerful new force that threatens the delicate balance they have maintained for centuries, us. The global fascination with these ancient wonders has turned them into major tourist destinations, creating a paradoxical situation where the admiration that fuels their preservation also accelerates their potential decay. The footsteps of millions of visitors, while a testament to their enduring appeal, are a physical weight that these ancient stones were never designed to bear. The narrow pathways of Machu Picchu, the delicate frescoes of Sigiriya, the fragile sandstone of Petra, each is vulnerable to the gradual but relentless wear of constant human traffic. The very air around these sites changes with the breath of crowds, and the simple act of touching a wall, repeated thousands of times a day, can wear away carvings that have survived for a millennium. This influx, however, is a double-edged sword of immense consequence. The revenue generated from tourism is often the single most important factor in funding the conservation work these sites desperately need. The fees paid by visitors pay for teams of archaeologists, engineers, and conservators to stabilize crumbling walls, repair water damage, and conduct essential research. For the local communities living in the shadows of these ruins, tourism provides a vital economic lifeline, creating jobs as guides in hospitality and in the craft industries. This connection can foster a powerful sense of local pride and stewardship, transforming a site from a distant relic into a living part of the community's identity and future. The challenge, therefore, is not to stop people from coming, but to manage the flow in a way that is sustainable, ensuring that the economic benefits do not come at the ultimate cost of the site's destruction. The solutions being implemented around the world are as innovative as the ancient engineering they seek to protect. Many sites have introduced strict caps on daily visitor numbers, requiring advanced booking to spread out the impact. At locations like Peru's Huayna Picchu, the mountain that towers over Machu Picchu, only a few hundred visitors are allowed per day, preserving the sense of solitude and minimizing environmental stress. The development of carefully planned visitor routes, often one-way systems on raised walkways, helps to channel foot traffic away from the most sensitive areas, preventing people from wandering off and causing unintentional damage. The use of virtual reality technology offers an incredibly promising tool for the future. Imagine being able to don a headset and experience a digitally reconstructed Machu Picchu as it might have looked at its peak, complete with bustling inhabitants and brightly colored buildings, all without setting foot on the vulnerable terraces. This kind of alternative experience could allow for greater access for those unable to make the physical journey, while reducing the physical strain on the site itself. The responsibility for this delicate balancing act extends far beyond the site managers and local governments. It rests with every single visitor. The choices we make as tourists have a direct impact. Staying on marked paths, not touching the ancient structures, carrying out all our trash, and respecting the sacred nature of these places are not just rules, they are acts of reverence. Hiring local guides not only provides a more enriching experience, but also ensures that the economic benefits stay within the community, reinforcing the value of preservation. We become participants in the site's ongoing story, and our behavior can either be a chapter of care or one of carelessness. The future of these places depends on cultivating a form of tourism that is mindful, educational, and deeply respectful. Ultimately, the silent cities, having endured the slow erosion of time, now face a rapid, human-shaped challenge. Their survival through centuries of neglect was a testament to their robust construction and remote locations. Their survival through the next century will be a testament to our wisdom, our restraint, and our collective commitment to stewardship. Protecting them is not about locking them away and throwing away the key. It is about learning how to appreciate them without loving them to death. It is about ensuring that the wonder we feel today can be felt by generations yet to come, that the silent stories carved in stone will still have a place to be told. This final challenge brings us full circle, back to the profound silence that first captivated us, a silence that now asks for our quiet respect and our active protection. So as our journey through these empires carved in silence draws to a close, we are left with more than just a collection of breathtaking images. We are left with a profound conversation with the past, a dialogue etched not in words but in stone. These abandoned cities are far more than picturesque ruins for our admiration. They are the deepest archives of human history, libraries whose shelves are made of mountains and whose pages are written in the language of architecture and adaptation. They stand as enduring records of what we are capable of at our very best, the artistic vision that painted the cloud maidens of Sigiriya, the scientific genius that aligned the temples of Tikal with the cosmos, the engineering marvel that is Petra's water system. They represent the pinnacle of human ambition, a drive to not only survive but to create something magnificent, something lasting, against the most formidable of odds. Yet these same stones also carry a sobering warning, a whisper of caution that travels across the centuries. They speak eloquently of the vulnerabilities that are woven into the very fabric of complex societies. The story of the Maya is a stark lesson in how environmental pressure can unravel even the most advanced civilization. The fate of Petra reminds us that economic foundations can shift, leaving the grandest of cities stranded. The silence of Ani echoes with the consequences of geopolitical change. These places teach us that resilience is not a permanent state but a constant process of adaptation, and that the greatest threats often come not from a single cataclysm, but from a perfect storm of interconnected pressures, environmental, political, and economic. They force us to acknowledge the fragility of the systems we build and depend upon, but to hear only a warning in their silence is to miss the most hopeful part of their message. For these cities also testify to an incredible human resilience, a stubborn will to persevere. The story of Mesa Verde is not one of extinction, but of migration, a conscious, difficult choice to seek a new beginning rather than perish in a failing homeland. The enduring culture of Mustang shows us that abandonment is not always absolute, that ancient ways of life can persist, adapting silently against all odds. The very fact that we can stand in these places today, that we can piece together their stories from the clues they left behind, is a testament to the enduring power of human curiosity and our deep need to understand where we come from. The silence is not empty. It is filled with the echoes of countless lives, of ambitions pursued, of faith practiced, of conflicts endured, and of adaptations made. Ultimately, these empires carved in silence hold up a mirror to our own civilization. They compel us to look beyond the surface of our bustling modern world and ask the same difficult questions that their ruins pose. What are the foundations of our own prosperity, and how secure are they? How are we managing our relationship with the environment that sustains us? What kind of legacy are we building, and what will the stones we leave behind say about us to future generations? The conversation started by these ancient kingdoms is one we are still very much a part of. By listening to their stories, we gain not just a deeper understanding of the past, but a more thoughtful perspective on our present and our future. We are invited to ponder our own place in the long, unbroken arc of human history, and to consider what we might learn from those who built their dreams upon the heights, only to see them reclaimed by the silent, patient earth. If this journey through the empires carved in silence has captivated you, the single best way to support this channel and ensure we can continue to bring you these deep dives into history's greatest puzzles is to hit that like button and subscribe. Every click tells the YouTube algorithm that you value this kind of thoughtful content, helping these stories reach other curious minds just like yours. Your subscription is a direct vote for more explorations of our shared human past, and now we want to hear from you. The world is full of silent cities and forgotten kingdoms. What lost civilization captures your imagination? Is it the enigmatic Olmec heads of Mesoamerica, the sunken ruins of Dwarka off the coast of India, or the mysterious plain of Jars in Laos? Share your suggestions for our next adventure in the comments below. Your ideas are the inspiration for our future journeys. To truly continue your own personal exploration long after this video ends, we have put together a treasure trove of resources waiting for you in the video description below. You will find links to reputable scholarly articles, breathtaking high-resolution virtual tours that let you wander through these sites from the comfort of your home, and our top recommended books that delve even deeper into the archaeology and the human stories behind the stones. These are the very sources that helped shape this narrative, and they are an incredible starting point for your own research. History is not a spectator sport, it is a participatory adventure. The greatest discoveries often begin with a single question, a spark of curiosity that leads you down a rabbit hole of wonder. So from the entire team here, a sincere thank you for your time and your curiosity. You are the reason we do this. Remember, the most extraordinary secrets of our world are rarely lost forever. They are simply waiting, hidden in plain sight, for a patient and curious mind to look a little closer, to ask the right question, and to listen carefully to the whispers of the past.